Few characters in fiction manage to achieve a lasting impact years after the inevitable end of their story. The ones that usually do create some sort of lasting impression on the viewer, be it from their personality, their character arcs, or just leaving an overall satisfying experience for the story recipient. But one character that I've found to have solidified herself in the anime zeitgeist seemingly has done so with all these things notwithstanding. And that would be the deuteragonist of Darling in the Franxx, the darling dinosaur herself, 02.
Straight to the biscuits. At 0800 hours this morning, an American soldier was eaten by a dinosaur.
That's a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
No, Claire, that's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Try thinking first before you open your mouth.
I know that intro may come across as a little harsh. After all, 02 does have a wildly captivating personality, but it seems that the general anime community has looked past her as a character and is fixated on her as a design. But there's a lot more to her than meets the eye, and I'd love to explore that further. But first, I'd like to examine her etymology. Like every character in Darling in the Franxx, 02 derives her name through a code name, that being the literal numbers 0 and 2. However, when spoken in Japanese, the name can take on a whole new meaning, as 0 can be read as maru, or circle, like how in English another word for 0 is o, and the Japanese word for 2 is ni. Given this explanation, her name can simply be read as O-ni, or Oni, a Japanese yokai which actually has deeper implications to her character, which I'll circle back to in a moment. What makes 02 unique is that, while she shares a similar naming convention that is used for the rest of the Plantation 13 parasites, the reasoning behind 02's lack of being called Oni is simply due to Hiro realizing the possible negative connotations of that name. Now, how Hiro knows of Oni, or for that matter the Chian, is beyond me given the timeline of the story and the active suppression of human history within the series, but I think that's a topic for a different day. This carries on throughout the entire narrative, with 02 actively only being called by her codename, while every other character is referred to simply by their Japanese play on words name. Now this is actually a subtle piece of characterization for 02, without you even realizing it, as the harshness of a codename does a lot to actually dehumanize her. When it comes to design, 02 has a rather subdued yet visually striking one. I'd go as far as to say it's visually simple yet eye-catching. She is visually more striking than any of their characters, while still keeping up with the overall aesthetic of the series. Now, this makes sense, as she was designed to be the flagship for the series, a feat the creative team has deemed a success, which, given the popularity of the character to this day, is really a testament to the quality of character that Masayoshi Tanaka and his team gave into giving life to this character. Tanaka stated in an interview, "The design team was focused on what sort of existence 02 is, more than what she looks like. We had this vague image of a badass transfer student that's kind of devilish and acts as a temptress to Hiro. Now, this type of design philosophy actually helped shape her into the character we currently see. Everything from her height to her pink hair originated from this. Now, most people interested in this video already know about 02's design, but I think a brief overview or some of the design aspects that tie into her character actually needed. I'm no illustrator or character designer, so I'm gonna try my best. An emphasis on the color red is one of the first things that helps separate her from the rest of the cast, who usually rely on grays and blues. This signifies her as the odd man out of the bunch at a glance. And while not exactly true to conventional interpretations of Oni, modern Oni tend to have red skin tone, very similar to the concept of a Western demon. This is far more pronounced in her child appearance, a time in her life where she was ostracized as non-human, and that's a sentimentality that followed her throughout her life. The second most defining characteristic of her design is her horns, which, while being the result of her partial Klaxo nature. Although, as a quick aside, I'd like to mention that the skin color of the Klaxosapien race happens to be blue, making her even more of an outcast, even among her own race. Although returning to the horn motif, I believe it originated before the event of the Klaxo within the narrative, and it's more or less just a literal interpretation of the devilish temptress role she was meant to serve. Although I don't know if that idea or the Oni idea came first in her creation. Other aspects of her character design arose from the need to make her stand out more. Originally, she was slated to be portrayed as a small, quiet, and diligent girl, a decision that was thankfully reversed within some point of the decision-making process. Other features, such as making 02 a taller woman, measuring in at around 170 centimeters or around 5'7", making her slightly taller than Hiro, to even the color of her hair going from jet black to pink, came from this decision-making process. It also seems that the red coloring was also agreed upon sometime after the hair switch, more than likely in an attempt to make her stand out even more. And last but not least, we have to talk about her outfit, which is a rather straightforward affair, as she looks far more militaristic than even her contemporaries within the Nines. And they're just wearing a white version of her outfit, but we never see them in full military regalia, making 02 seem more like a commander and a general in a sense, despite not actually being one. Before I delve too much into 02 as a character, I wanted to fully address the symbolism of the Oni within 02. And while I'm not entirely sure if most of these are intentional or not, they fit together from a narrative standpoint so well that in retrospect it actually gives me a bit of a deeper appreciation for her. While there are many different interpretations and stories about Oni spanning not only thousands of years, but several different cultures, as they are not an entirely unique creation of the Japanese, especially their current incarnation. A few things to note about the Oni are that at some point in time they merged with a Hindu spirit, and I'm gonna butcher this name, the Rakshas, or I guess in this case the Rakshasi. And to simplify their purpose, they're a cannibal spirit. But once these two beings became syncretic within the Japanese culture, Oni would often be depicted as devourers of men, an act not too dissimilar to what 02 goes through, enough times to have earned her the title of partner killer. And while it's not the same process as literally devouring another person, the implication is quite similar. Another possible connection to Oni, although I admit this one's a little bit more far-fetched, is the creation of Oni. As within several Oni stories, wicked souls become Oni in death, as they cannot be rehabilitated. But several stories of the most wicked of people become Oni in life. But here we have a case of a wicked, godless people creating an Oni who wishes to turn human via the opposite means. Like I said, maybe it wasn't intentional, but the concept of people, mostly disobedient children, turning into Oni is a concept so circulated in Japan, so I like to believe that this was somewhat intentional. Tying into the concept of unruly children becoming Oni, I think it's only fitting we talk about 02's childhood, as much of her personality is directly linked to this backstory. During the flashback we're given within episode 13, we gain insight into significant details about 02's past, which kind of help retroactively explain her characterization. And for a single episode, it does a rather succinct job at making not only the audience care deeply about her, but sympathize with her on some level. Unless you're some die-hard Ichigo stan. We see that most of the human interaction the little demon dinosaur gets is mostly negative, ranging from belittlement or, straight up torture. So it seems fairly obvious she developed some feral tendencies, being extremely territorial and guarded of her possessions, especially the one thing she owned, that being the Beast and the Prince storybook given to her by one of her caretakers. This book, alongside her fateful encounter with Hiro, is the catalyst for most of what we understand about the present-day 02. Almost every aspect of her character is aligned with this backstory in some regard, from the minute details such as her sweet tooth to core character traits. I guess having your memory wiped would kinda stunt emotional and mental growth, but let's be honest, she wasn't in an environment suited for the development of either of those to begin with. When we first meet 02, she is surprisingly not the emotional wreck we'd expect someone with her backstory to be. Seemingly, she's rather well adapted to socialization and people as a whole, but the facade can only go on for so long. On the surface, we're greeted with a confident, brash, smug, and assertive girl, whose rebellious nature is her most endearing quality. But peeling back those thin layers, we find someone who is ultimately none of those things. The confidence quickly diminishes once you take into account her insecurities about her very existence. Her brash nature is a smokescreen to prevent people from getting close, and she rebels against a system that she herself helps perpetrate. To further expand upon the notion of a broken character, we see early on that apart from her darling, She has a rather dismissive attitude towards most people, almost to the point of them not existing. This carries on further than just dismissiveness, as she openly doesn't care if people die or not, stating it's one's lot in life. The superficial nature of her caring even extends to her current darling, Hiro, who experiences violence at Zero Two's own hand. It's this dismissal of death that actually makes her the prized possession of Ape and Papa, who manages to exploit her insecurities into a lucrative arrangement, crafting a relentless child soldier, a monster hell-bent on becoming human. While I've mentioned her personality aspects that she crafted for herself to keep others away, I've failed to mention the one trait that makes her who she is, and that would be her determination. I would actually go as far to say that determination is the epitome of what her character is meant to represent, but the actual word I'd use is desire. I know from the offset this is a strange thing to propose, but desire is not inherently sexual in nature. Although, when exploring the subtle themes of Darling and the Franxx, one could easily take it in this direction. And in a sense, that is what she represents. This bewitching beauty who spawns desire within the boys of Plantation 13, and thus leads to the exploration of sexual themes within the series. As she was always intended to be a temptress of Hiro. Although within the series she isn't a temptress in a traditional sense for Hiro, but one that awakens his innate desire to pilot a Franxx again. The desire that I'm referring to is one that applies strictly to her character, and that is the desire to become a human. A desire that she is willing to ultimately do anything to achieve, even willingly put her alleged darling in harm's way. And this is only rectified when she discovers that her current darling and her real darling are one and the same. And this doesn't happen until midway through the series, so about episode 12 or so. This all-consuming desire to be something that she isn't has led her down a rather dark path, and had that path never crossed with Hiro's, would have led to her eventual death. If not a physical death, which pretty much was assured, but a spiritual one, once it dawned on her that her only driving force in life would never be achieved, and she could only ever find solace in doing the one thing that she could do, which was mindlessly killing her enemies, like a certain somebody. And that somebody being her direct biological relative, the Klaxosaur princess, a wholly underutilized character which serves as the perfect foil for Zero Two, in both appearance and title. She is the princess, whereas Zero Two is the monster. It's actually a shame they didn't do much with this character because space. Once Hiro and Zero Two rekindled their relationship, a lot of the negative aspects of her character subside and are replaced with more positive incarnations. Her guarded and territorial nature become an innate desire to protect. As she lets more and more people into her life, she becomes a much more gentle individual, who shows genuine compassion and care for people she once considered to be expendable. And near the show's climax, time and time again, has put herself on the line for others, making her character arc complete in a sense. Even the desire to become human fades into the background as the story progresses, since the tables change and the prince becomes a beast. Or, as I refer to the process, going out on the floor, walking the dinosaur. Ultimately, this desire to become human is one that is symbolically given to her by the end of the series. Which, for those of you that hate it, while your point is extremely valid, and I agree, just go pick up the manga, just admit that an Oni created from the sin of endless bloodshed could, in the end, be redeemed and born again as a human is kind of a touching end cap to the story. Although by this point, the plot thread of wanting to become a human has been lost for about 10 episodes by the conclusion. Well, they tried. At the end of the day, I believe Zero Two was actually a masterclass at character design and concept. But due to several external factors, these ideas never really matured, or stayed with the average viewer of the show. And these themes and motifs weren't expressly conveyed in an easily digested manner, which often makes them lost in consumption. It seems that the reliance on the complexity of her character wasn't even a driving force in her longevity, which to me is a damn shame, as she still stands out as one of the most notable and unique female leads in the genre. And perhaps the ultimate tragedy of her character is the desire to be human, only to be endlessly objectified for cheap market value, instead of appreciated for the bold yet subtle character she truly is. Speaking of which, I think my 02 rub just arrived.